What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about Death Note: L Changed the World. So this is a very long overdue video. Earlier this year I ended up covering Death Note and its sequel, Death Note: The Last Name, I believe is what it's called, which were the Japanese live action movies that tell the story of the anime of the same name, Death Note. And so then they ended up releasing this spin-off movie, and I was actually supposed to cover this movie with Blacktastic Media for a long time. I've had his portion for the review for months, and unfortunately I was having a hard time finding this movie anywhere. I'm pretty adamant on trying to find a really crystal clear copy of the movie, but when you go online, this is not an easy DVD to purchase or find, nor is it anywhere that's streaming here in the States. I couldn't even find it anywhere to rent online, so I did have to go the illegal route and find a way to watch the film that way, which wasn't my favorite thing to do, and it wasn't in the crystal clear quality that I maybe wanted it to be, but I finally got to see the movie. So let's talk about this pretty horrible movie, to be completely honest. Before we do that, I do want to say a big thanks to my guest for being here in this video after all this time, Blacktastic Media. Always love having him here on the channel, and I very much look forward to all of you guys hearing his thoughts in just one moment. But for now, let's get into my thoughts on Death Note: L Changed the World. As I mentioned, we already covered the other two films that really tell the story of Death Note, but this one, L Changed the World, decided to be a spin-off that has nothing to do with the events of the original anime or manga, but instead focus on the character of L, who is the main adversary to Light, the main character of the Death Note series, and the events of this movie are taking place side by side with the events of those other two films. So over the course of this movie, there's a few times where something will happen to the characters, maybe somebody will die or something is said, and it kind of lets you know where we are in the timeline based on the other movies that have already come out. And quite frankly, I gotta be honest when I say that didn't 100% work for me. I found it to be a film that felt really messy, and as its own film, it just really didn't have a story that really gripped onto me. The basic premise of this is that there's been, on top of everything else that L is dealing with, he's now dealing with the fact that there's some sort of virus that's being weaponized and that he needs to kind of help different people to try to stop. And yeah, I kind of just found it to be super underwhelming. It just didn't really feel necessary, and just to think that this was going on at the same time as this event of the other Death Note movies just doesn't really make sense, because there's like a global set of stakes here that don't ever really feel super dangerous, but you really know that nothing is going to happen because you know what happens in the other Death Note movies. So in a lot of ways, it just feels incredibly just irrelevant and unnecessary. Let's talk really quickly about Kenichi Matsuyama, who is the actor who plays L from the Death Note films as well as this one. And he's somebody who I've not really enjoyed since the first time I saw him on screen. I can admit that he definitely takes the mannerisms of the anime character and he, does them decently enough. I can admit that he kind of looks the part and that he looks like a, good cosplayer of the character, but ultimately I just don't really find him to be a good adaptation of that character to live action. I think it's one thing to be a copycat and just follow those mannerisms to the T, but ultimately anime is so specific in its feel, its vibe, its look, that you really can't capture that same essence in live action without it just feeling cheesy. There's an element that makes anime what it is and can only be done in that medium. And so whenever I see actors try to completely copy an anime character with very exaggerated qualities in live action, it ultimately never has the same charm that it does in the anime. And so yeah, when it comes to Kenichi Matsuyama, I just can't ever really get into his character because it feels like he's taking these goofy things that L does in the anime and he's just doing it so much and so often that it doesn't feel like a little quirk, instead of feeling like a little bit of a gimmick, and doesn't really feel like he's giving a genuinely good adaptation performance. It just feels more like a copycat. And I think when it comes to changing something from one medium to the next, adaptation is really important. I'm a huge comic book fan, and when I was a kid, I used to bitch and moan about some movies not being comic book accurate. However, as I've gotten older, I've loved being able to see certain stories be interpreted differently with these versions of stories and characters that we're seeing on screen. You can take that same basic premise and do something different while also making it feel very much in line with what we know that came before. And I think that that's ultimately the most important thing when it comes to adapting something or bringing something to screen that's been done in animation, and especially anime, because it's such a specific medium in its sensibilities and various ways that characters do things, the mannerisms. And so when it comes to the character of L, I'm just not really a fan of how this actor has played the character, and a lot of that comes down to the direction he was given. And let's talk about the director of this film. He's actually a pretty well-known director, Hideo Nakata. And yeah, I don't really know how I feel about him as a director for this film, because I thought the film was pretty messy and all over the place. I was never really gripped by the characters or the events that were unfolding, and ultimately I found it to be a fairly poorly directed film that just felt incredibly messy. However, I gotta give Hideo credit where I can, because the dude directed the first two original Japanese Ring films, and he would end up coming back to direct the second American film, The Ring 2, starring Naomi Watts, from obviously the American reboot versions of those films. So clearly he's worked on some pretty, big name films, and he's got his stamp in cinema history. But when it comes to this film, yeah, I just can't say I'm a big fan. Ultimately, I did not enjoy the overall feel and vibe when it comes to this movie. I was not in any way, shape, or form, gripped to the story or the characters, and I was honestly just clamoring for this movie to be over. Now, before I wrap up my thoughts on this movie, let's go ahead and hear what Blacktastic Media had to say about this, and then we'll go ahead and shut this video down.
L, change the world. My man hit me up via Instagram to do the third part of a trilogy I didn't even know existed, and the Death Note movies. Now, this is a trip. I don't know if this is canon because of the manga or because of the movies, but this movie, L Changed the World, was like, is this a prequel? Or is it a direct sequel to the very first Death Note? And it's in between both other movies? It's a little bit confusing. Then when you get into the movie, all the characters that you got involved with in the first two movies are not in this movie. Yeah. They make a glorified cameo. Even the Death God, the character I like the most besides L, makes a 1 minute or less cameo in this film. I guess they do that to establish the timeline, like this is all connected in the same universe. That's the only connection you have. In this movie, L signs his name in the Death Note book, then he burns both of them. And you see this blue smoke come from the books and all these souls yelling. I'm like, I thought those people were dead. So are they stuck in purgatory? Between hell and heaven? Oh man, I was lost. Well, this movie opens up in Thailand, where there's a bio weapon killing people. These people are bleeding from all their orifices. Then they nuke that son of a bitch and blows everybody to smithereens. I'm like, okay. And I forgot to mention, once L signed his name in that book, he had 23 days to live. So he's going to die. Well, I thought he died before. Whatever. So a little kid escapes from this explosion in Thailand, a little boy. And the little boy finds a way to get in contact with L. So he has like an adopted son throughout this movie who's not infected by this bio weapon. So that's weird. What kind of skin tissue do you have, buddy? What kind of organs do you have? And of course, there are villains, protagonists who are working with other people to create this bioweapon. And they're trying to clean up the environment. You know, they're like Thanos. Let's kill half the population to start all over again. Because the earth is overpopulated. Let's kill half these motherfuckers and control the other motherfuckers. But you know, when you have a weapon of that range and mass and size, you gotta have an antidote. So let's kill half the people, but make sure we take the antidote so we don't die. And that's pretty much the premise of this whole movie. And the guy, the professor, doctor that invented this bioweapon and also the cure, the antidote, dies. I know death is not supposed to be funny. And sometimes when people act like they're dying, it just comes across as funny. Well, this movie has some of the funniest deaths that I've seen on film. Some people continue to keep dying. They take a long time to die. They like die 3 times. And I'm like, damn, this is some bad dramatic acting, but it's so bad. It's so good. And these protagonist villains, they run around in a pack with knives and machetes. This one female, she stabs and cuts everybody when she runs into. And she stabbed them in places where you shouldn't die. She stabbed some dude in the shoulder. He was like, "Aah!" He died. I'm like, wait a minute, she just stabbed him in the shoulder 3 seconds ago. I don't get it. But the doctor who's behind all this stuff, that invented this stuff, and, you know, has a daughter. And he's been using her as a guinea pig all these years to see if the antidote will work if you're infected with this bioweapon. Well, when her daddy dies, she got to get in contact with Elle herself and hang out with him and this little boy. So you got Elle with 2 little kids as his partners throughout this film. These motherfuckers are having picnics and they're chastising him about eating bad. Elle, the reason why you're slooped over and slumped over and have bad posture because you eat candy all the time and you're not taking care of yourself. Little kids chastising this man. It's true. Because all he does is eat candy and bad food and try to solve all these mysteries and crimes, you know. And he walks with his hands in his pockets, slumped over, and once in a while he tries to straighten up in front of the kids to give them some promise, like, yeah, I'm going to take better care of myself. Motherfucker, you going to die in a few days. Let's face it. So it's a race against time to find out where this bioweapon is being made, who's doing it, and more importantly, get the antidote. Does this sound familiar? Yeah. It's the least of all the Mission Impossible movies. Mission Impossible 2. I have Clamera, and I'm like, this is the exact ripoff of Mission Impossible 2. But hey, that was directed by John Woo. Asian Connection. They love talking about world destruction. Instead of having a small film about a certain thing, no, they got to kill half the population in these movies. And the same thing, Tom Cruise had to get the antidote in order to fight the bioweapon, and the lady he was involved with, she injected herself. It was a race against time to get her saved. I'm like, this is the same damn movie. It's nothing like Death Note. It's like, again, I don't know if it's canon, I don't know if it's a sequel. Most likely it's a spinoff of the character L from the Death Note universe. And that's what it is. If you like L as a character, then most likely you might enjoy this film. Like me, I like the premise of the Death Note period, and that's not the premise in this movie. It's a small premise because he signed his own name and, you know, he's going to die in 23 days and he burned them books. That was it. You know, everything else is a totally different movie, and it's the main plot device to push the movie, which I was not interested in. I'm like, and him and these kids are having all these little adventures. They're on the bus, they're on the train, and the next thing they're riding bikes, and the little boy's in a basket in front of the bike that L is riding. It's weird. It's really, really weird. And in the end, he dies. He puts the boy in the orphanage, and then he gives the boy a name. Because Throughout the whole movie, this boy don't have a name. He gives him the name Near. Yeah, Near. I'm conflicted, y'all. I'm really conflicted. This series is interesting. I like some things about it, but moreover, I don't like it. And this movie totally took me out of what I was used to with the first two movies, because it took a little bit of time to digest what I was getting from the first two movies, and this movie here just totally just ignored those two movies. It was crazy. Anyway, L changed the world. If you're a Death Note fan, I guess watch it to find out what happens. If you're a fan of L, yeah, go right ahead. Other than that, I'm not going to revisit this movie. I'm done, but I have some great laughs. When that doctor dies inside that little chamber, man, I'm telling you, that was pure comedy gold. And when these people get infected with this bioweapon, it's kind of nasty. You're bleeding from all your orifices, and then I'm like, wait a minute. If this thing is nuking and radiation and microwaving your organs, if you take the antidote, isn't it too late? Your organs are already fried if you wait too long. So how's the antidote going to help? It's going to replenish your organs? Oh, your heart and lungs and pancreas are going to come back? No, bruh, you're dead. It don't make sense. The premise is dumb. This movie sucks ass and licks balls. I'm out. Anthony Perez, close this up, brother, because try to put a bow and a ribbon on this motherfucker, because I can't do it. Yo, it's just my point of view.
A big thanks to Blacktastic for being here in this video, and I have to imagine, my friend, that you probably thought this video was never ever going to come out, but here we are. We're finally talking about Death Note L Changed the World, and I'm glad this will probably be the last time we ever see this movie, because yeah, this was not phenomenal. But thank you for the laugh, thank you for the entertainment, thank you for being a part of this video, and if you guys are not already subscribed to Blacktastic Media, what are you doing? The link is down below in the description box. Go give them some love, let them know I sent you. But for now, let's go ahead and wrap up my quick thoughts on this movie. Overall, like I said, I don't love the film. I didn't like the performances. I didn't like the story. And I feel like because of the way they chose to tell the story side by side with the events of the other two Death Note films, it just feels messy and fairly irrelevant. Beyond that, what I can also say that just didn't work for me was the use of English in this film. And that might sound strange because, I watch a lot of stuff in English. I watch most of my stuff in English unless it's in an original language. And so when it comes to those other two Death Note films, I watched them in their original Japanese language because that's the way that the actors were performing, and I definitely want to be able to hear their performance even if I have to read. And so with this movie, you have use of English and Japanese over the course of the film, and it never ever feels natural. If you ever have somebody who is an English speaking individual in the film, maybe an American person, a British person, whatever the case may be, they sound so just bland and static. It's just something like, hey, what's going on over there? Hey, we need to go over there. It's so dramatic and so just bland. There's no personality to the way that they're speaking. And then if you have any of the Japanese actors talking in English, it would feel so random where they're in the middle of a conversation with another Japanese person speaking in Japanese, and then out of nowhere they start speaking in English, and it just sounds like people who are uncomfortable speaking in English. It doesn't sound like somebody who's very fluent in both English and Japanese who just decided to start speaking in English. No, it sounds like somebody who's having a hard time speaking in English. So it just kind of takes you out of it, because it's like, why did you just change languages in the middle of this scene? Why are you speaking English to this person all of a sudden when you were just talking to them in Japanese? It doesn't really make a lot of sense, and that's a lot of the issues I have with this film. Little things like that ultimately just kind of had me going, and overall, the most important part being the story that just didn't work for me. So that's going to be my thoughts on Death Note L Changed the World. A big thanks again to Blacktastic Media for being here in this video. You guys can find the link to his channel down below in the description box. I highly recommend going to subscribe to his channel, and while you're at it, subscribe to mine. Also hit that like button, it helps the channel out. And if you guys would like to leave a comment down below on this movie, this video, Blacktastic Media, whatever the case may be, please, it would help the channel out and I would greatly appreciate it. But for now, I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.